We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Good morning. I'm Aisha Hauser, and I am coming to you from the land of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish, also known as Seattle, Washington. And I am so excited for today's show because we have Janine Gelsinger, Executive Director of UU Justice Arizona, also known as UU Jazz. We have a lot to talk about today. It'll be Janine and I. And behind the chalice is Tanner Linden, our Director of Membership and Communications. And Tanner, I just feel like I change your title every week because I really should write it down and say your exact title. So welcome, everyone. The weather here in Seattle is fall. It's cool. And Janine, I'm going to bring you right on, and we could talk about UU Roundup and what's going on in the world and the wacky, oppressive things going on in your state that you are helping combat. So Janine, come on over. Hello.
Hey, Aisha, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be back on The View.
We love having you. You're one of our fave guests. So some of the things going on, we'll do UU Roundup, and then we'll go right in and maybe World Roundup too, because there seems to be, in this apocalyptic hellscape that is modern society, a lot going on that is also not necessarily related to Unitarian Universalism. So first, the Liberal Religious Educators Association is having our annual first fall conference, the first one in person since 2019, since the pandemonium. So we will be in Birmingham, Alabama, and we are affirming the 8th principle and living out what it means to be intentional and doing anti-racism work. We will be visiting the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, And it definitely is going to be very powerful. And if you are interested, go to Laredo.org. You can join online, or if you're wanting to do a last minute trip to Birmingham, you are more than welcome. So let's see, that's happened. Oh, and You the Vote. Janine, do you have anything to do with You the Vote?
I do. We're lucky.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, we're lucky as the State Action Network in Arizona to be linked into You the Vote National, working with Jason and Nicole and the amazing Side the Love team who's setting up that program. And there are every week text banks, phone banks, friend banks to different states across the country. So no matter where you are, you can get involved with You the Vote and talking to people about the importance of things going on in their state. I know this weekend is the weekend of action for Kentucky State Action Network, and they're talking to people about the abortion ban that's on the ballot in Kentucky for their state. And we know as UUs how important it is for us to have bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom and reproductive justice for everyone to choose how to raise their families or not, and be able to raise their kids in a world that is safe and healthy for everyone. So Kentucky this weekend, if you go to the You the Vote website, you can find all of the phone banks, text banks, things to do. If you've never phone banked before, it's fun. Aisha, you like phone banking? I like phone banking.
I don't love it, only because I think the extrovert in me needs to have entire conversations with many, many people all the time, and that doesn't always happen. And but I know it's important, and I will absolutely be cheering y'all on. I do texting, and I like doing different things. I actually, you know what I like? I canvass in Seattle. I canvass door to door, and that I actually liked a lot. We had Colleen Echohawk was running for mayor a couple years ago, and I went door to door, and it was pretty. She did not, unfortunately, win because she would have been amazing, but I do enjoy going door to door.
Yeah, canvassing is the best. That makes sense because you're an extrovert who likes conversations. You can have those when you knock on someone's door. That's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, no, I like canvassing a lot. And here's the thing that's super important for folks to realize: we cannot overstate the importance of this election. And I'm Egyptian. I've said this a lot. Egypt's had a dictatorship for decades, and they're not fun. I think people in the United States are underestimating how quickly it can happen, and how truly awful it's going to be. I mean, worse than it is, even for white people. So, I think we cannot overstate the importance of at least. Sure, the Democrats, we can bash the Democrats all we want after the election, after they win, because we at least need to hold off on the people who are actively saying we want to do harm, we want to take away your rights, we want to make the world worse for anyone who doesn't fit the narrow demographic of whatever white cishet men, white cishet women, heterosexual. So do you want to talk a little bit? What's going on in Arizona? I really want to ask about the 1894 law. What?
Yes. So as everyone knows, when Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court, and a lot of our states, including Arizona, had to wait and see if they were going to enforce abortion bans that were already on the books. And ours was before Arizona even became a state, like literally an 1800s law banning all abortion in all cases except for the imminent death of the pregnant person. And we waited to see what would happen. Our abortion clinics stayed open. We kept seeing patients and waited. And just last Friday, the Pima County courts upheld the law in order to prosecute someone for an abortion. So we're upholding an antiquated law pre-statehood from the 1800s in order to criminalize abortion care in our state.
So practically speaking, what kind of activism can mitigate this or combat this? Like I imagine the ACLU is suing. Like what's been done on the ground?
Yeah, there's a lot of legal battles. You're right that the ACLU is suing to challenge this. The problem with court solutions right now is that the highest it can go is the Supreme Court, and we already know what they will do. So right now, what we're really working on in Arizona two things. Always mutual aid. We have networks across the state of people who've signed up, who've signed up on a clipboard I carried around at every women's march and every Roe v. Wade protest to make sure that we're here for each other. We know we take care of us when our government does not. And so there are people across the state who are willing to drive people, to watch people's kids while they go out of state, to cook meals for them when they come home, and to make sure that we're caring for each other. I know there's lots of youth congregations in California, Nevada, and New Mexico that we've talked to that are willing to host folks. And then right now, we have a coalition across the state of, I want to say, like 20 to 30 different organizations in a reproductive justice coalition. It's Black women-led, trans-led, and it is from groups like the ACLU, like you mentioned, Planned Parenthood of Arizona, all the way down to, UJazz. And so we're working together to make sure that we come up with the best solutions. Right now, electorally, what looks like the biggest solution, we were talking about You the Vote earlier, is our county attorney elections. So in Arizona, the county attorney, in other states you compare it to like a district attorney, the county attorney has prosecutorial discretion. And that means they get to decide what is prosecuted and what is not. They don't get to make the law, but they get to decide what parts of the law are prosecuted. And so in Maricopa County, we have most of the state population, and we also have all of the abortion clinics. So already in Arizona, if you need an abortion, you have to drive to Phoenix, to Maricopa County. So the Maricopa County attorney election is something we're doing a ton of voter education about, so they understand the importance, because there's a candidate running for Maricopa County attorney who has pledged to never prosecute anyone for healthcare decisions, not healthcare providers or anyone seeking abortions. And so that election could literally make the difference whether people go to jail for their healthcare choices or not in Arizona. And so that's something we're doing a lot of political education on. Obviously, we can't endorse a candidate, but we're talking a lot to UUs about the importance of that race and doing a lot of educational phone banking about reproductive justice, so they understand this is on your ballot in Arizona. Just because it's not a position or a ballot initiative or a petition, this is where it's on the ballot in Arizona.
I wonder, some of the things that come up for me about healthcare is doctors taking the Hippocratic oath to first do no harm, and them choosing. I mean, here's where we're at, the phase of this country that's always been there. Like, at some point, you're going to have to choose what's morally right over what's legal, right? And so I guess I wonder, this is just me kind of pulling an existential thread. We're doing there's this idea that we're prosecuting the women, but part of what's happening is doctors are making the decisions not to offer healthcare for fear of losing their license. And part of me feels like, well, what would happen if the American Medical Association came out and said, we're never taking your license away for doing the right thing? Like at some point, like, big entities need to say, we're going to support you. You're not going to lose your license. But here's the other piece of this in terms of religion. The Catholic Church has brought up an alarming amount of hospitals in this country. And they are, so that's also part of what's happening too, is that I think we don't talk enough about how many hospitals are owned by the Catholic Church, which is that happening in Arizona? I imagine that there's Catholic hospitals in Arizona as well. Yeah, I mean, here in Seattle, there's a few that even I was alarmed, because they don't necessarily change the name. They just change and all of a sudden it's a Catholic hospital. Anyway, so I just went off on a little bit of a tangent there. I guess I feel like I wonder, like, kind of having activism go on a lot of different fronts, in terms of education, yes, fighting the law, but also kind of saying to doctors and nurses, like, I don't know any I don't know. I wonder if we could find any doctors that can come on The View and we could talk about this. Anyway.
Yeah, there's physicians from abortion clinics in our coalition, And they were saying that one of the especially cruel things about this Pima County court ruling was that it was on a Friday afternoon. And so all weekend, physicians were calling their lawyers, trying to get a hold of them, asking them, how bad does it have to be before I intervene? Patients, bleeding and dying, and physicians wondering, not only losing their own licenses, but sending this woman to prison.
It's horrific. I mean, it's truly, truly horrific to live in this time where it's just, I don't really even have words about how horrific this all is. And it's happening in real time. The 10-year-old who had to cross state lines to get an abortion after she was sexually assaulted. Like, come on, folks. I mean,
I think about that a lot. I have a 10-year-old daughter, as you know, and I had to have a conversation with my OBGYN. How young is too young for an IUD?
Yeah.
I never thought I would have that conversation, but what happens if something happened to her? What?
The practical and existential crisis we're in is, well, yeah. So this is, Arizona's going backwards quick. So the law that just passed privatizing education, like all education in Arizona?
Yeah, so this was on the same day as the abortion ruling. It's been a rough few weeks here in Arizona.
Man.
So for a very long time in Arizona, we have been the testing ground for privatizing education. And the method that happened, and I think this is important for people in other states to hear, because if we're the testing ground and it just passed here, it's coming for your state. So the method that they used was, we have these things called ESAs, and they're vouchers. They stand for Empowerment School Accounts, which, we love to name horrible things, something that makes them sound good.
Right.
But the ESAs allow you to pull your child from public schools, and they will give you $7,000 on like a card that you can use towards private education. It can be religious education. It can be, someone just opened up a Turning Point Academy here in Arizona. So literally just like a MAGA school for kids. It can be anything. It doesn't have to, their private schools are far less regulated, especially here in Arizona, but in many states. And that is taxpayer money that comes directly from the public school fund. So ESAs were always available for situations, and they should be, for situations where kids aren't getting their needs met by the school district. So for example, you have a kid with special needs, the program that the public school is offering is not adequate for your kid. You show that it's not meeting their needs, and then the state will give you money to pay for their specialized education at a school that specializes in disabilities, autism, whatever school you need for your kid. So that exists, and that is good, that ESAs should be available in a small amount. And that is what all of our partners agree with. But for many years, they've been trying to pass universal voucher expansion to every kid in the state. So everyone can take their kid out of school, get $7,000 from the public school fund, and pay whatever private school they want for their kid to go to. They tried this in 2018. And in 2018, Save Our Schools, an amazing organization, there's actually some UUs and leadership there of teachers and parents, got together and said, no way, and had unbelievable amount of signature collections, hundreds of thousands of signatures on a petition, and they were able to get on the ballot through our citizens initiative process a bill that everyone got to vote on that said, we are capping universal voucher expansion to, I think it was like 3% of kids in the state, which is still a lot.
Yeah.
But we can't grow beyond that.
Yeah.
And so this got on the ballot in 2018, and over 60% of Arizonans voted for it. They said, no, don't. Arizonans want strong public schools across party lines. People want strong public schools.
Yeah.
So this went through. We thought it was over. Just this last spring, the state Supreme Court repealed that. They said it was unconstitutional for that ballot initiative to be on the ballot. They struck down what the voters overwhelmingly decided. And then the state legislature had the go-ahead to pass this bill, and the governor signed it just this spring. And it was universal voucher expansion. Every kid in Arizona can now take $7,000 out of a public school fund with taxpayer money in order to attend private religious schools or any school of their choosing. So, and the thing, I mean, I don't think I have to say this, but the thing about it is $7,000, that's not enough to go to private school, right? Private schools are like $25,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
And so it ends up being a discount for the rich, because in the last several weeks, we've seen over 12,000 applications come in for vouchers.
Wow.
And 70% of them are kids who have never been enrolled in a public school.
Such horseshit. Oh, it's so, yeah.
So we had a last ditch effort, a last chance to stop this law from going into effect. It's our referendum process. The founders of Arizona and the Constitution were very suspicious. We're kind of a cowboy state down here, and we like to have lots of checks and balances. And so there is a process where citizens can repeal a law that's passed and put it back on the ballot, refer it to the ballot for voters to decide. And so we collected 140,000 signatures in 80 days, which has never been done before in the entire state, to try to get this off the ballot. And it wasn't enough. They disqualified, they brought in lawyers and disqualified so many signatures that we didn't make the threshold to repeal the law. So it went into effect a couple weeks ago.
I'm so sorry. That is, wow. Yeah, and as you said, I think every single person in the United States needs to pay attention, because this is going to come forever. This is the insidiousness of the right, the insidiousness of those who are determined to uphold the systems of oppression in this country. And it's so sinister, and it's the tyranny of the minority. This is not the majority of the country, but it doesn't matter, because it is the tyranny of the minority that have always been in power. In service to violent extractive capitalism. And so our education system, since the founding of this nation, has not been about having an informed public and electorate. It's just been about creating workers, really. And that's, I think, the part that's underestimated. When there's a long list of reasons that this country needs to engage in reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans and indigenous people, because it's truth telling, and this is the founding of this nation, and every single decision made by those in power who want to uphold it is in service to violent extractive capitalism and people as commodities. And it's not about at all having, that's why they think socialism is so bad, even though it's not that we don't, but the narrative around socialism and taking care of each other is in direct opposition of individualism and extractive capitalist, ways of doing things. And so, and humanity is in peril. It's not the planet. Once we're done, and once humanity's gone, the planet will heal itself. So I always quote George Carlin, who's like, it's arrogant to say we need to save the planet. The planet will be better off without us. This is about us. And the roots of what's happening is capitalism that has been exported. The way the United States has done capitalism has been exported globally. And so now let's look at what happened with oil. So OPEC, who doesn't give a shit about destabilizing this country, because they're trying to, the Russians, the Saudis, they don't give a fuck about us. Cut oil production, so now gas prices are going to go up again, and it hurts. The wealthy can afford to pay $60, $70, $80, $100 to fill up their car. They don't give a fuck. So I'm just going on a tirade, Janine, so feel free to interrupt me.
Preach it. Amen. Yeah, the thing about being in Arizona is that we see all of that, and because we've had some of the worst of it, we've figured out ways to fight it. And so even though, we think we're going to be able to stop the prosecution of abortion through this county attorney race, and even though we lost the Save Our Schools battle again. It's not over. There's ways to, there's lots of lawsuits in process, and there's ways to change the makeup of the legislature for candidates who do support public education. So we continue to fight. Some of the good things, though, on the ballot this year, and we're actually phone banking on some of these right now as you use. We were able to get something on the ballot through an organization called Healthcare Rising. You were talking about the privatization of hospitals and Catholic Church in particular buying up and taking over hospitals. One thing that I recently learned that I didn't know before, and maybe a lot of your viewers know this already, but was how predatory medical debt works. So if you have a hospital bill, and 1 in 3 Arizonans have medical debt, outstanding medical debt. So that's a lot of us. I mean, I know I do. If you have a hospital bill, say it's for $100,000 and you can't pay it, the hospital writes it off. Most hospitals are nonprofits, right? They write it off. Their doctors got paid, people got paid, but a debt collection company, a private company, will buy that debt for pennies on the dollar. So they'll pay $100 for your $100,000 debt, and then they own it, but they'll come after you for the $100,000. And every penny they collect over that $100 they paid is profit.
So gross.
So we have a bill on, or I'm sorry, not a bill, a ballot initiative, a proposition, we call them in Arizona, on this November's ballot that is some protections for predatory medical debt. It bans wage garnishment for predatory medical debt. It raises the minimums that you're allowed to keep. It used to be like $500 or something you could have in your account, and everything else they took for this medical bill. It raises it to something more like $5,000 so that you can actually have somewhere to live. It protects your house and your car and like some, essentials that you need in your bank account so that you're able to eat and drive your car to work and live as you pay down this debt. It probably doesn't go as far as most of us would like it to. I mean, a lot of UUs are pushing for universal health care, right? And in the meantime, it's going to directly impact 1 in 3 Arizonans if it passes to be able to lift some of the burden of the crushing medical debt while we continue to push for a solution. Because no one should go hungry or have nowhere to live because they can't pay a debt collection company profit off of their medical illnesses.
And debt shouldn't even be sold. I mean, again, the insidiousness of fucking capitalism. Yeah. When you even think about what you just said, like buying debt that a hospital has already written off and then being allowed to ruin people's lives. And this is like by the tens of thousands across the nation, if not more, that people, it's true. Like there's something deeply, what's the word? Broken, like evil. Like I don't believe in hell, but I also feel like there's such a, there's something so deeply cruel about how we choose to make money in this country. Like just the idea that there's a debt collection company that buys debt from hospitals and then goes after people. Now it's like trauma upon trauma, because there's also folks who are on calls. Like I'm just thinking now, going down that rabbit hole, right? People hired, usually young adults who are also in debt of their own, I imagine, who are calling people trying to collect debt. I mean, you know what I mean? Like there's just this insidiousness that is soul crushing, that, I mean, the myriad ways that we in this country hurt each other and chip away at our souls, it is painful. And how do we reach people, Janine? I mean, I think about this as a faith leader. When I talk to people who just kind of in my daily life and who aren't UU, or who maybe aren't as who choose not to be as politically aware, I'm like, everything's political. And if we turn our way at what is happening to the least among us, it's getting worse and worse. I mean, I know I'm going off. Do you see what I'm saying? Like I say to myself, like, how do we reach people? How do you use faith leaders, where's the entry point to say to folks, we do not need to be so cruel. Money is made up. We don't need to live this way. I ask myself that a lot. Like, how do we I don't know. I don't have an answer, but I know it's pretty it hurts my heart. I hear this and I'm like, there's layers and layers of the damage that's being done, the trauma, in addition to the the carceral system and caging children, which is still happening. And just the cruelty of this country is it's heartbreaking. It's tragic. It's tragic. And I don't know how to combat it except doing what we're doing, at least our little part, right?
Yeah. I mean, you asked, what do we do? I think in organizing, we say that the way that you move people to change is through education or agitation. And UUs probably have enough education. We do that well, right? We're good at educating people. Many UUs are educators themselves, right? You and I are educators within Unitarian Universalism.
Yep.
And so the answer to some of these issues isn't that people don't know, right? Our UUs know about climate change. We're not fighting climate change denialism within Unitarian Universalism by and large, right? I'm not saying there aren't any, but when we have enough education, when we know what the problem is, the other half of that is agitation. And I think we have a difficult predicament right now in Unitarian Universalism. I mean, the fact is that some of us move through life without experiencing agitation because our privilege keeps us comforted, right? White folks like me, people with privilege, cishet folks, they move through life without experiencing agitation and with expectations of a certain level of comfort. And as Unitarian Universalists, we believe that people all need care, right? We are really good at providing community for people and care for people. And especially the last few years during the pandemonium, we did a good job at providing care and community for each other. And I think some of us might have to rethink how far we're going in order to provide comfort, when what we might need is spiritual grounding, resilience, how to live on the edge of the apocalypse and still find joy, but not turn away, right? Because it's uncomfortable. Listen, the topics we talked about today are uncomfortable. It makes me really uncomfortable to know what's happening in the state. It makes me worried about my children's future. I have 2 daughters. They go to public schools. What's going to happen next year when their public school budget is cut over $1 billion? What's going to happen when they have to make decisions about their sexual health and they have a lot less options? Birth control is next, right? We know that.
Yeah.
So it would be easy to look away. It would be more comfortable to look away. But I know I have to look my daughters in the eyes and tell them I did everything I could. And I know that UUs want to do that too. And as faith leaders, you asked about what faith leaders can do. I think we need to take a really hard look at, are we trying to provide people with comfort, or are we trying to build courage? And, it's tricky, but ministers can do this. They can understand this person needs care right now. This person needs community right now. This person moves through the world as a Black or brown person, and they are experiencing trauma all the time. They're not the person that needs agitation in this moment. They get enough of it, right? But if all we're doing is saying, let me comfort you, and UU churches are only a place of comfort and refuge, how are we really building the world that we want to live into?
Oof, there's a word. Exactly. How, it's interesting. A UU minister many years ago said, who served many of our larger congregations tend to be, have a wealthier demographic, mostly white. I know it's not obviously every single one, but this minister said, well, wealthy people need comfort too. Yes, and it was a weird not weird, but I was kind of like, who said they didn't and weren't already getting that? It was kind of an interesting, okay, but there's also, our job is to, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I think we forget that because I think there's an attachment to one of the observations my former husband made when we first entered into a UU church when my kids were little. My son was still in preschool. They're now young adults, my children. And he said, we went to a service. I had already been to a service years earlier, but it was his first time. And I said, what do you think? And he said, well, because he said, well, if we're going to do any religion, this is fine. But he said, it's a bunch of rich white people wanting to feel better about being rich and white. And I'm like, whoa, ouch. And yes, I mean, and it's harsh. And I know people get very upset at hearing that. But I think if we don't examine the truth of that, because, being you alone, or being liberal, or having an intellectual exercise about the right thing to do is simply not enough. Not when fascism is here. I mean, bodily autonomy was taken away for over 50% of the population, period. That happened. That's happening. And the horrific things you just listed in Arizona and happening in other states. 300 anti-trans bills have been, just all over this country, targeting children. Bad enough we're targeting any trans person and children, and the hostility and the cruelty. And the thing that's happening with the MAGA folks and the right, and especially the evangelical Christians, is they're building community around cruelty, around, the horrors of oppressing, and they're open about it. They're not pretending that's not what's happening. And there's been a huge underestimation from white liberals. Martin Luther King wrote about this. James Baldwin talked about this. The folks who think they are on the side, the white folks. And James Baldwin, I quoted from his book, The Fire Next Time. And for anybody watching this who has not read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, let that be the first book you've read if you haven't. Amen. And what part of it he was writing to his nephew, also named James, and he said, we won't be free until they're free. And he was talking about white people. And it was profound. This was written in the 60s and in the midst of everything that was happening, that James Baldwin said, we won't be free. Black people will not be free until they are free. He was talking about, and that there was something about that line that the compassion shown for the recognizing the self-imposed horror that white people have created for everyone else, but have for themselves. And I think there's this, the respectability politics that people have thrown at white UUs, especially. Like, well, if my tone, I mean, Chris Kenny and I don't need to go over the teaching again, but the ways people wanted to tone police how we talked about what was going on is still astonishing. And I've said over and over, if Please and Thank You brought liberation, we would not be where we are right now. So that's not a thing. But UUs don't, in general, white UUs are not comfortable with agitation. So I think that's a super helpful framing, because there is no easy way out of this, and there's no way we're not going to be able to not have some form of agitation to get to the other side, if it's not too late.
Yeah, and we can learn, and by we, I mean white people, we can learn to be courageous and resilient and strong in the face of agitation, because a lot of other people have had to. And that's not fair, but we can learn it too. We don't have to be so fragile. We don't have to think that it's too much for us. It's too much for us to look at, so we need another vacation, or we need a pumpkin spice latte and a bubble bath. Like, we can learn to care for each other. We can learn to be a community. We can learn to form communities of mutual aid. We can learn to resist and be resilient and strong, and breaking free from all of the constraints by understanding what white supremacy culture looks like and how I uphold it, and understand how it affects me too, how it makes me feel like I always have to be perfect, like I always have to have the answer. If I can do my internal work to break free from that, and I can find a place of spiritual grounding, of resilience, of strength and courage, then I can actually do the work needed to prevent all of this from happening.
Right.
But that's not going to happen if we live in a world of comfort and we're free from agitation. And I want to say too that, like, when you say, wealthy people need care too, or need comfort too, life is hard and shit happens, right? If you've had a death in your family, if you're going through an illness, bad things happen to everyone. That is true, right? And no one is saying, well, I don't want to speak for you, but I assume none of us are saying that when something happens, you don't deserve care, right?
Okay, I'm
You
gonna say
deserve care. You deserve community. We uphold everyone's humanity. Everyone has inherent worth and dignity. And you churches are really good at providing that community. But they'll let the focus be on care for strength buildings, care for resilience, care for courage, and not comfort in a bubble to never experience anything negative.
Well, and here's the thing that I've noticed. I've been a part of several UU churches on both coasts. What UUs do well is when they already know people offering that care. The part that I have experienced is it's not a given in our UU culture to welcome the stranger or to offer that care for someone who maybe is not of the same socioeconomic status, or the assumptions that are made when somebody comes into the EU congregation. Eventually people get there, but it feels like there's kind of a, somebody has to persevere if they are not part of the already existing kind of cliquish demographic in order to become part of that. So that's the part that we don't do welcome well. One of the things I used to say about the Mormons, if they ever became socially liberal, Unitarian Universalism would end, because Mormons do welcome really well.
They have the best casseroles, the funeral potatoes.
I mean,
they know how to show up for each other.
And they show up for the stranger and the neighbors, and I'm just kind of naming the Mormons, but like their sense of building community and welcome extends. Yes, they're wanting to, recruit more Mormons. I get it, but if they ever became super socially liberal, which there's no danger of that, but let's say, like I said, Unitarian Universalism would end because we don't do welcome. We don't, and maybe it's getting better. And I know I sound always like I don't mean to, I'm hard on Unitarian Universalism because I love Unitarian Universalism and I want Unitarian Universalism to do and be better. That's why it comes from love. Well,
I don't know if you know how right you are about the Mormon church, but you mentioned earlier the 300 anti-trans bills across the country. So we killed all of those in Arizona.
Yes.
And we shouldn't have been able to do that, right? That shouldn't have been able to happen in Arizona. But you know what one of the key was? The LDS church.
Wow.
Yep. So our trans leaders in the state, we were part of a coalition statewide to fight anti-trans legislation, and the building relationships with faith leaders in both Christian churches and LDS churches, and having them appeal to their legislators was how we killed those bills. It was
let me pick up my jaw. I had no idea. So what now? Okay, so now we have to go on this thread because I'm super curious. Well, because I didn't think the LDS church would fight against anti-trans bills. And what was I'm curious, did they name like how this fit into their theology or how they show up?
Child abuse. Yeah. Whoa. So it was this amazing group of Mormon moms in Mesa that really took this on about targeting children for conversion therapy, which we know is incredibly abusive. And every psychological organization has denounced it. Every, worldwide organization has said it's torture, it's cruel. And the Mormon moms agreed. They didn't want their children going through conversion therapy, and they wanted their children to be able to play sports. And that like family values piece was the piece that was able to activate or agitate the Mormon moms in Mesa. And they relentlessly called and met with their legislator, and that Republican legislator was who killed all of those anti-trans bills in committee, because he said he has listened to his community and they do not want this.
Well, I never thought I'd say yay Mormon moms Arizona, but this is where I think, okay, let's give a shout out to Kansas over the summer that who saw that coming. So when you said Kentucky, I'm like, I actually have a little bit of hope, even though it's the state that keeps giving us the demon Mitch McConnell, but it feels like maybe Kentucky will come through too. But I think there are folks, if they stopped being afraid of Black and brown people and turned off bullshit Fox News and whatever, like in Kansas, folks, and the interesting thing, if you what I read about how they approach that in Kansas, coalition building using the right-wing talking points. You can't tell us what to do.
Yep. Yes.
So yeah, that was, so there is a lot of value in, at this point to fight fascism, because it's worse than anything, is coalition building. Exactly to your point, is we may not agree on every single thing, but we've got to be creative. And even for me, I mean, I've had to say to myself, like, what's the bigger danger here, and how do we work together? So thank you for that. That is really, wow, great to, it's thank
And
you,
I wanna
Arizona, at least under the anti-trans bills.
and I wanna give credit where it's due. The Mormon moms were the ones who were able to move the state senator, and the trans leaders were the ones who appealed to the Mormon moms. So, the credit where it's due. I mean, the number of friends I had who sat in rooms talking to legislators, like having to defend why they existed, that is heartbreaking work. And they did it, and they literally saved lives in our state.
Wow. And I think the thing that folks, agitation can come in many forms. Going to board meetings, like having you churches, get clear on which board meetings and send 4 or 5 people from a congregation there to council meetings I mean, it's, agitation. No one's saying you have to stop traffic on Route 90 or Route 5 every minute. What you can do is find out what meetings are happening. Look, a lot of our folks skew older, folks who are retired, who do have time, have time on their hands, and or this is a way to find out. Agitation can take many creative forms, right? And so I think that's the thing, and learn from the younger folks, the Gen Zers, who have been just so creative in disrupting the right whenever they come to town. I guess I go down a lot of TikTok rabbit holes. I'm not proud of it, but I like TikTok. And so I learned about these. I'm trying to think. It was maybe it wasn't CPAC, but some kind of conservative gathering, and a bunch of Gen Zers volunteered and kind of disrupted the whole thing, because they thought they were on their side at some kind of conference. And it was masterful. I'm like, wow, like agitation you can, especially if you're white, you can get into these spaces and pretend, you agree, and then get in there and then, argue the other side or whatever. You know what I mean?
We have an event every year called You Day at the Legislature. And sometimes you use come to lobby training, and they're like, oh, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to yell at my congressperson because they're doing the wrong thing. And I'm like, how about instead you wear your pearls and go as a church lady? Like, come on, like this is the lane. This is the lane we have. In organizing, you have to use what your resources are. You need to know your assets, right? And they're like, well, it's not really a church. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You belong to a local church. You don't have to say which one it is. And these are your concerns. Use that. You're right. They don't know what side you're on. They don't know. And you don't have to lie. I did not go on record as telling everyone to lie to their congressman. I'm not saying that. But you can go in and represent yourself and use those talking points like you said. And that's a lot more effective than going in and yelling. Because as soon as you come in with your Side with Love shirt and start yelling, they know who you are. They're not listening anymore.
Yeah, it's easy to dismiss. And that's the thing, getting creative about how, and it happened a few years ago at a Trump rally when I think it was Korean TikTok, or I don't know, they were saying K-pop fans signed up for all these tickets. So like, very few people showed up because they thought they, had sold out the stadium with free tickets. And it was really a trend on TikTok, and everybody signed up for these tickets. I mean, we can get creative in a way that disrupts what's happening. And I like your idea. I love your idea that if you're white and you're of a certain age, you can say, I'm coming in because my religious values are that we affirm people's right to live the way they want to and to support community and XYZ and such and such. So I think being creative and not feeling like, because going at this from different ways and different sides is exactly what needs to keep happening. And folks need to listen. White folks need to listen. That organizers know a lot more. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned Gen Z. I mean, Gen Z is already agitated because they were literally born into this, right? Like they were born into the rise of fascism in our country. So they're already agitated. They know they can't escape it. There's no comfort for them, right? Especially queer kids and Black and brown kids. But honestly, all of Gen Z at this point doesn't know that they have a future.
Exactly. This violent extractive capitalism gave an entire generation no fucks left to give. So good luck with that, people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I'm in my 50s. So like, what? We gave an entire several generations after this no fucks left to give. So I mean, yeah.
And honestly, when we talk about electoral work, when we talk about you, the vote, the biggest excuse we hear from folks is, oh, I don't want to phone bank. I don't want to canvass. I don't want to text bank. It makes me so uncomfortable, right? I think the shift needs to be, why do we expect so much comfort? Right? If I have to go take my 10-year-old daughter to the OBGYN to figure out what our options are, you can pick up a phone and phone bank. I know you can. And you know what? It might not be comfortable the first time. And if it's not phone banking is the lane for you, you can donate until it hurts. You can do so many things. But in this moment, we meet the moment by doing something we've never done before, by pushing our comfort zones.
Say that.
It's the only way we're going to make change.
You know what's uncomfortable? Fascism. So,
amen.
Let's be clear. You know what's really uncomfortable? Christofascism, rooted in misogyny, transphobia, homophobia. That's pretty fucking uncomfortable. Anti-Blackness, anti-Indigenous. I mean, anti-immigrant. This white supremacy is uncomfortable. Fascism is uncomfortable. And it's been also exported globally because Italy is, has this right-wing woman. So that's the other tactic of the right globally, is they're putting up white women to do their bidding. So yeah, fascism's uncomfortable. So anything else pales in comparison, really, if we're going to be honest.
Yep.
So we are coming up at it's always fun to talk to you, Janine. We're coming up at almost the end of the show. What else did we miss anything here in the take a look at fascism review over here? I'm not sure what we missed.
I guess, I mean, we've really pushed people to push out of their comfort zones. I also want to just say that if you do, at the end of it, you find a lot of strength. You find a lot of joy. You find a whole community of people taking action. And I will tell you, like, I sleep well at night. I feel good. I know that I'm doing everything that I can. And if you go to bed at night worried about the world, you can feel better by taking action. If you really push yourself out of that comfort mode, because, when we feel bad, we're like, oh, more bubble baths, more self-care. What can I do to feel better? You can take action as a form of self-care because it goes beyond yourself and it goes to community care, feeling connected, knowing that you're making a difference. It feels really good. Yes. So if you're seeking comfort, what you really need is action.
Yeah. And exactly. The way to get to comfort is to fight what's going on and to build that muscle. It is strengthening a muscle if you've never had to do it before. And frankly, most white people haven't had to, but exactly right. So thank you, Janine, so much. This is, I really, again, appreciate your work and your advocacy and your fierceness. Thank you. And this was a really, it was an informative, hopefully helpful show. And you know what? And there's also, I believe wholeheartedly in finding joy in resistance. So building community and working together. So thank you. And hope to see you in person at some point soon. Thank you all. Ciao. Till next time. Yes. Oh, I gotta, we have a producer in our ear, Tanner. We have a Faithify campaign right now. So here's the thing about the prison ministry of the CLF that has been going on for many years. folks who are in the carceral system, often when they have chaplains, they are usually from more conservative denominations and don't have a space to talk about who they are, whether they are part of the LGBTQ community or they're atheists, but one who affirms and loves. So Unitarian Universalism and the Church of the Larger Fellowship has been in the prison, among incarcerated Unitarian Universalists who are talking to each other about this faith that says, hey, you are loved, holy, and sacred just as you are. And we are growing at a pace that is, on the one hand, phenomenal, and we want to be there to affirm folks, and we need money to do it. That is the practical part of how capitalism works. So, as Janine said earlier, give till it hurts. If you are able to support our Faithify campaign, please do. The link will be in the show notes, and in wherever you are watching this, the link to the Faithify will be there. And hopefully we'll go over our goal. Our goal is 15,000, right, Tanner? And let's go over that. Let us please give till it hurts, share, send it to folks you know who could afford to write a $500,000 check. I know we have folks who are able to do that. And so support a crucial ministry to people who don't have access to feel that they are loved in any other way than through UUs. And I do want to give a shout out. We do have on the ground a few UU prison chaplains that are at prisons themselves, are there. And we are the only ones who have a pen pal program, and we do courses for folks through mail, and we advocate for prison abolition, but we haven't even been able to get to the prison abolition work yet in a more substantive way because the population is growing, which is phenomenal. So let people know they are loved no matter where they are, and support our Faithify campaign. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.